Welcome to Growth Hack by Poppy Digital. Tips and tricks to master the algorithms from industry insiders. Now here's your host, Julian Espinoza.
Welcome back to Growth Hack, where we break down marketing channels like Google, Facebook, Instagram, and show them how to make them work for you. In marketing, we're always told to tell the story of our brand. Some companies attempt to do this, and others flat out don't. I've always been fascinated by the companies that do this really well. I went down this huge rabbit hole of voice experts. Oh man, is it a rabbit hole? I even hired one myself to see what all the fuss was about. Well, in this episode, we bring on Carolyn Mays from Switchblade Lemonade to share how you can make your story more profound and less cliche. Spoiler alert, we didn't hire Carolyn, but we wish we did. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thanks so much for having me, Julian.
So we like to get right into the growth hacks. So what's really interesting and what's radically different about this episode is we're going to be talking about voice and sort of who we are from a written content perspective, something we've never really done and talked about. So where I want to begin this interview is we're always told to tell our story. Why do you think companies don't do this very effectively?
I think people don't do it effectively because when it comes to taking a risks creatively, creative risk, people kind of always have their training wheels on, so to speak. And it's interesting because we're still looking at people who took a risk and did it safely, so to speak. And so we're kind of caught up in the collective response of what is okay, what is not okay, what is an acceptable risk, what is, social suicide. And so, there's just a lot of anxiety around it. The real irony to me, and I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, is that if you're doing this work right, it's not a risk at all, because all you're doing is looking into like why you exist. In my business, people are looking back into their histories, and all they're doing is coming up with the truth and how they're going to present that truth in a really beautiful way. And so when you're just giving people the truth, there isn't really a risk in that at all. And so I think people are caught up in this idea that they have to do something like really outlandish, and you don't.
It's really interesting because we hear, there's certain industries, and I face this a lot when I talk about LinkedIn, especially when I do like workshops on LinkedIn. It's like things need to be very professional, and this idea that someone wrote a guideline that we have to have a very professional voice on LinkedIn. So can you talk to this concept and maybe address this idea that does certain industries need to be professional in a certain way, or can you take some in this case risks in some industries?
I mean, I think every industry has room to look for the truth, and say what is. But of course, there are industries where it makes more sense to walk a more professional line. Well, I mean, I'm thinking of like medicine, especially.
Or attorneys.
But I mean, there are attorneys that do really creative work, and there are financial industries that do really creative work. And all they're doing is saying, again, is talking about what their approach is. And they're again, presenting in a really cool way. And so it comes off as very creative or edgy or risky, but it's not, people love it.
When you shift over to this idea of like, okay, we can take some risks or be a little bit more ourselves, or whatever adjectives you'd like to give it. I've seen you work with some brands and work with some people to build really this strong story. Can you give us some examples of that looks like?
Well, so this kind of goes back to what people are doing wrong, so to speak. And so a strong story is not going to state the obvious. I think that's another mistake that people make, is they'll tell this story, this or that thing happened. This is our beginning. This is who we are. And then they present you with something very obvious and trite about their grit or their tenacity or their some kind of rah ending. And it's very we're too smart for that. People are used to good storytelling at this point. We get exposed to a lot of really great stuff. That's why Netflix is so popular. And so anyway, I think that businesses in particular tend to be very condescending with their takeaway, very, very, I don't know, family friendly and PG. Not that you have to be like vulgar or anything. I'm not saying that, but it's very benign, and trite, and we see right through it, and we're not impressed.
Do you have some examples you could give us, like maybe a client that you can talk about how they would position themselves versus how you position them after?
Well, I can speak in general terms of I can think of something very specific. I was working with someone. This was just kind of a quick consulting call, and this is a major theme that I see, and we'll probably talk some more about this, but people will tell these stories of trials and tribulations, right? And then their takeaway is has something to do with their rebelliousness, their anti-status quo-ness. These are all very hot trends right now. We're all mavericks, right? And I can just guarantee you, if that's the takeaway from your story, your gritty story of licking the gutter and climbing your way out of it, that's not it. There's more there than that. That's part of it, but that's not all you have to say. That's not where the wisdom is.
My version is tuna can. I don't lick gutters, but I did eat tuna for a period of time because
there you
I was
go.
trying to make it.
Right. Tuna, ramen. Yeah. So
now, when a brand, a person, an entrepreneur, a company is able to develop this brand as you see it, with this stronger storytelling, with a stronger vision, what kind of success have you seen?
Well, let me back up for a second and say this. I want to make this point, is that people tend to get really doughy-eyed when they talk about storytelling, like how it connects us and helps us empathize with each other and helps us feel less alone and yada, yada, yada. And that's all true and very wonderful and beautiful and all that. But really, and for our purposes here, the story is the container for your bigger, more poignant ideas, your beautiful, profound ideas. And so the question that you're really asking her is what are the success stories of beautiful, profound ideas? And so that is the whole entire world runs on beautiful, profound, and heinous ideas, right? And so, okay, so there's that. And the way that looks in my, little itty bitty corner of the internet is that, that can range from making an extra 50K in 3 months, after using your bio as a script for video. That is gut punching an interviewer on a podcast who asks you a question and you get to present them with your idea. It's knowing what to say on a sales call. It's knowing what to say on social media. It's knowing what to say on your website. It's having a whole foundation to build your entire brand around.
So I'm convinced we need to work on our stories. We need to work on our storytelling. I definitely am a little nervous to go back and look at what mine says now and kind of see it with this lens. I think you have some building blocks to get us to how we can think about our story. And I think it's so cool you call it Bio Like Beyonce. Can you tell us a little bit about what's in this Bio Like Beyonce strategy?
So Bio Like Beyonce is it's a downloadable PDF guide to figuring out what your story is. And it's called Bio Like Beyonce because it is very Beyonce centric. But I use Beyonce as an example of someone who is an amazing storyteller. And it's really about her 2016 Lemonade album. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It's worth a watch. It's amazing. Everybody go watch 2016 Lemonade, the video.
We will have it in the show notes. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And so if you don't know, so Beyonce's married to Jay-Z. Jay-Z cheated on Beyonce at one point, and then Beyonce made this whole album around it. And so the point is that here's this woman that we refer to as queen before anybody was referred to as queen. And this really taboo thing happens to her, right? Her man cheats on her. And then the second really taboo thing happens, which is she stays with him. And so the point is that no matter who you are or how traumatic you think your story is or personal you think your story is, you can tell that story if you tell it right. Because I work with a lot of people who have plenty of stories to tell, but it's like, oh, like I don't want to tell this one because it's really traumatic, or oh, I do want to tell this one, but it's, again, I feel like I'm going to out all these people. So we talk about how to find the story, first of all, and then how to connect that story to your business. And then it's basically giving people the permission to tell the story that they need to tell, and to do it in a beautiful way that doesn't jeopardize you in some way, and that isn't like, so there's a difference between vulnerability and just like, gutting yourself in front of everybody, right? And so we want the former to happen. And so anyway, yeah, it's a perspective on that. And as I said to you before the show, we're getting away from do's and don'ts and talking about creativity and craft and how to pinpoint, what you got.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people probably listening to this right now are thinking to themselves, okay, how do I connect my story to what I'm doing, right? Whether you're a chemist, you're a digital marketer, you're a brand, or whatever it is that you're building. Because I know I'm sitting here thinking, okay, my story was being raised in a household in a family where there was addiction, and being raised under those circumstances kind of led me down some interesting paths, and how to figure out how to connect that into what I do today is very, very interesting. I do actually share my story, a version of my story. I share it on LinkedIn. I'll put that in the show notes if anyone wants to see a version of my story, a piece of my story. But to your point, when I do share those bits, which is not very often, out of maybe 100 posts, you might see one that's got this raw, gritty truth to it in my story. It seems to be one of the most impactful pieces of content that I put out, and I don't put it out for that reason. Whenever I put those out, it's because I found something. I was talking to an old friend when I wrote the last one, and they were going through something really rough. They were about to go into a rehab, and we were talking about numbing the pain. And I sort of wrote them this long text message, and I read it to myself after, and I go, oh my God, this story, I need to create a version of this publicly. And I shared a version of that story publicly, and the people that reached out, like, hey, that touched me. Thank you for sharing that. That affected me. I even had an old professor of mine reach out and say, I'm proud of the man you've become today. And then like 6 months later, he hits me up and says, hey, I need help with, the work that I do. And conversations started. So it is very interesting. I don't think I've made the gap from what my story to what I'm doing today, but that sounds like a nice journey to go down. And I'm glad you're doing that for people. So how does someone work with you and what does that even look like?
I just want to say really quick about what you just said. Like I think that's amazing that you're sharing that particular story, because addiction is like, I mean, everybody's been touched by that, like a lot of people. And it's interesting to me how often people shy away from it when it's like, okay, look, you're speaking about a universal subject matter here. And so anyway, so bravo, I guess. And then how do people work with me? So there's a couple of ways. I mean, one is BioLite Beyonce. That's like just like an entry level way to start, and it's just it's a $49, guide, but it also comes with a free workshop. It's like offered quarterly, and so anyway, it's a way to, and it's long, and it's a way to get in there and like really do some exploration. But then I write for people who are doing this work, and that's really for people who are going all in and they're like stepping out, and they're really kind of pivoting in this big new way. And then I also offer I have a beautiful biography writing salon where it's a quarter-long program. It's a little bit DIY. It's also very hands-on. I'm in the trenches with my people, and they're getting feedback from me, and they're walking with a handful of deliverables. So
Love that. And so we will have that in the show notes. We'll have, it sounds like we got a few things. We're going to have the Bio Like Beyonce link. We'll have your website. We'll have my story. And then we'll have Beyonce's 2016. What is it? Is it a video of her?
Her whole album is free. I don't know if you still have to pay for like the video version, but the visual album is worth the watch, and it's not expensive,
Great.
So.
We'll put that in the show notes. Support the Queen, Beyonce.
All hail the Queen. That's right.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really an honor to have you, and we're excited to bring you back at some point.
Awesome. Thanks again, Julian.